Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Political Pulse podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Painter, and I am extremely thrilled, happy, honored to have Brad West, Mayor of the City of Port Coquitlam, on the show with me to talk about all things local politics, provincial politics, and possibly even beyond. Brad, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Brad, before we dive in to all kind of the minutiae of politics, can you tell me what got you interested in working in politics and just kind of being involved? It seems like a thing that right now, I think, with all the polarization that we see, is less attractive to people. So cast yourself back a little bit. Why did you get involved?
I think it was because I was raised in a family where it was an expectation that you would be involved in the community and giving back to community in some way. My family wasn't particularly political. Parents and grandparents weren't involved in politics, but we're certainly involved in the life of our community here in Port Coquitlam. I was very involved in my athletic pursuits, which didn't pan out the way I hoped that they would. But I grew up playing hockey and soccer and baseball. And my mom in particular was very involved in the community and in minor sports and volunteering. And so just kind of like volunteering and being involved in the community was just something that we did. I suppose became more aware of politics, I guess kind of as life took a turn for us. And my dad passed away when I was quite young. I was 10. My sister was 7. And, after that happened, we had some rough times as a family. My mom went and got a second job and just can remember from that time. I mean, it's hazy, right? You're 10. But the one thing I can remember from that time is just how hard my mom worked. She was determined that my sister and I would not lack for opportunity or the ability to participate in things. She really worked herself to the bone. I remember she told me years later after I became a dad, that she once went 9 months working every single day. She didn't have a single day off in 9 months. Oh, and I think about her doing that while raising 2 kids on her own. And I just think, how the hell did she do it? I mean, it's amazing. And, I guess it kind of got me thinking that, people like my mom who are working hard, doing the right thing, contributing to their community, trying to raise their kids right. Those are the people who should be a priority for our government. And I don't think that that's always the case. I think there's, lots of powerful interests out there that try and pull government in one direction or the other. My mom would never have enough money to hire a lobbyist on her behalf, nor did she have enough time to be able to, go and be a professional protester. She's just kind of a regular person trying to make it through the day and make sure that her kids would have a better life. And it just, I think, awakened in me an awareness of politics that developed as I continued through school and then university, and then eventually started to become more involved in politics in Port Coquitlam, volunteering on election campaigns, just really basic stuff, going door to door, pounding in signs, that sort of thing. And then eventually culminated in myself running for city council in Port Coquitlam. That was in 2008. And I was elected and served 3 terms on Poco City Council, 10 years. And then ended up being elected mayor in 2018. So, in retrospect, it all kind of happened by accident. There was never like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. It was kind of how life unfolded. And in your life, you get moments where you have opportunities and you can, either pursue those or give those a pass. And, I've tended to always, when I think it's been the right thing to do, to step up. And I think, that's sort of an expectation that my mom has set with my sister and I, that, you don't just sit back, you step up when it's the right thing to do. And so that's kind of what has guided my decision-making around what I do in public life and pursuing becoming the mayor of Port Coquitlam and the work I've done since then.
Well, and it sounds like that commitment to step up and step up and step forward was certainly something that she did for you and your sister, and hats off to her. hats off to all the moms out there, the single moms and the moms that are making it work, because I know exactly what that's like. It's not easy. It's tough. And yet through that, it instills kind of a sense of purpose, a sense of confidence, a really interesting sense of place. And I think that's an interesting segue, because you as mayor of Port Coquitlam, I think, are in a really interesting place in BC, because Port Coquitlam, and I don't mean this in any disparaging way, but it's not a place that gets a lot of attention. Surrey gets a lot of attention. Richmond today is getting a lot of attention. Vancouver, of course, gets a lot of attention. Poco, not necessarily as much. And yet I think there is so much happening outside of those kind of, those urban centers in the Port Moody's and the Port Coquitlams. Lots of things are happening that I think we need to talk a little bit more about. So why don't you let listeners tell us about the good city of Port Coquitlam? What's been happening there? What's going on there that we should know about?
Yeah, I'm incredibly proud of Port Coquitlam. And, I can't help but just look at the picture behind me. Terry Fox, in my opinion, the greatest Canadian. And Port Coquitlam is the hometown of Terry Fox. And I think in so many respects, Terry's, his perseverance, his quiet determination, the fact that he's kind of an ordinary kid who went and did extraordinary things. I think that's really woven into the DNA of Port Coquitlam. And that's kind of characterized this community. I've lived here my entire life. And, I think Port Coquitlam has, you're right, been an area that, it's kind of like, oh, Poco, yeah, where is that? And sometimes I still run into that attitude, although I think it's increasingly changing, because I do think our city is going through a unique period of revitalization and renewal, a lot of excitement, optimism. We're certainly not immune to challenges that other communities are facing, and there's larger macro things that are happening. But I truly sense from our residents that there's such a sense of pride in this community and the things that we're doing. And certainly by no means am I taking credit for those things. We've had a real team focus on our council, but, more broadly in our community of what we want to be. And I think that community buy-in, when the community really has a strong sense of unity around where it wants to go, you can accomplish some pretty amazing things. So when I surveyed the landscape of, the kind of last number of years and the priorities I've tried to bring as mayor, first has been, I want Port Coquitlam to be the best place in the province to raise a family. And I reflected on my upbringing, beginning of our chat, and I think that probably largely informs a lot of this prioritization. So what does that mean? It means the city is making all sorts of investments in being a family-friendly community, from our amenities to the safety of our parks and our community in general, the look and feel of our community, the upkeep of it, a focus on childcare, all the essentials that go into raising a family. We've really prioritized. You have to come out here and see some of these playgrounds we're delivering. They are second to none, and it always really warms my heart when, on a nice day, I'm going by one of the playgrounds. I see it absolutely jam-packed with kids, and, and they're playing together, and parents are meeting each other, and families are getting together. And I think that is like the essence of community building. I want it to be a community where people know each other and can build community connection. I think that has so many spin-off effects that are very positive. So we have a whole focus around that. We've built a beautiful new community rec center that, again, I think is absolutely first class, largest rec centers in the province. And you go there on any given day and the youth center is packed and the senior center is packed and the pool is jammed. And we've got 3 arenas and we've got a gymnasium and a basketball court. And
sounds like an amazing place, Brad. Why aren't there more people in Port Coquitlam?
Well, we are growing. I mean, that's the other thing. It is a growing community because I think increasingly people are looking for a place where they can put down roots and really not just have a place to rest their head at night, but actually to live and every sense of the word and what that, the totality of life, and which I think is really about connection. And so, we've done some really good things there. Our other key focus is on core municipal services. I think it is a reality that a number of cities, they get drawn into all sorts of different areas that fundamentally are outside of the mandate and responsibility of local government. And I can understand the temptation to try and, perhaps address every, problem or issue that you think exists. But there are limitations to what local government can do. And I kind of subscribe to the first things first theory. There are things that people actually send their tax dollars to City Hall for. And before you go off, trying to deal with issues that are outside of your lane, you better be sure that you're taking care of those basic core responsibilities. I've met lots of mayors and city councilors in my day, and not to disparage them, some of them I think are confused about what office they've been elected to. They think they've been elected to the United Nations, not to City Hall. And so I'm very much about, let's do our job. Let's do the things that we are responsible for. We can be advocates. And certainly I think people will know I'm not shy about speaking out on issues that I think are important. But in terms of the focus of the municipality, it has to be on the things that you're actually responsible for. So we got a great focus on that. And I think, we're delivering very high quality services. For instance, I would challenge anyone to find a community that does snow removal better than Port Coquitlam in the Lower Mainland. And, when it snows and people got to get to work and get around, that's important. And so, we do things like that incredibly well.
And not all do you see yourself getting out there with the snow and shoveling and getting up, shoveling photo op?
I've certainly gone on ride-alongs with the crew, and the operators, snowplow operators, are exceptionally talented. Because there's cars all over the place and they got to navigate very tight spots. They do a great job for us. It all ties into, I think, the final piece that I'll mention, which is I want to keep this an affordable place. And when I took office as mayor, Port Coquitlam was sort of middle of the pack when it comes to property taxes in the region. And I can tell you, and this is a fact, that we are now the lowest property taxes and utilities in the entire Metro Vancouver region, which includes 21 cities. And in fact, if you live in Port Coquitlam, on average, you are paying $1,700 less every year than the average Metro Vancouver taxpayer. And that's real money. That's nothing to sneeze at. And, and certainly nowadays families can use that money. And we've done it, again, I think, by really focusing on our responsibilities, constantly looking for savings and efficiencies. And we've created a culture in our city where this is just how we do things, and our staff have bought into it, and I'm really proud of the results. So Port Coquitlam, I think, is really punching above its weight when it comes to municipal government, the things that we're delivering, while also keeping our community a very affordable place for people.
It's really an interesting juxtaposition, because I don't know if we're past a time now where governments seem to just get bigger and bigger and bigger. You mention likely it's because they're going outside their lane. They're going outside their real designated area of importance. I live here in Victoria. I have seen exactly what it looks like when a municipal government acts like, as you say, it's a United Nations. Suddenly everything is under the umbrella of its jurisdiction, and people aren't getting the basics right. And yet somehow it almost feels like a shell game where they almost know they can't get the basics right. And so they're trying to maybe distract with higher things. I'm not trying to be conspiratorial about it, but one could kind of imagine that, well, okay, we know that things aren't going well with infrastructure, or we know that we've got a rapid crime issue downtown, or there's other problems. So let's talk about all these big things that we actually can't really do anything about. But if we shout and scream and yell loud enough about them, maybe people will ignore the fact that, they can't get good running water, or they can't get, their toilets flushed, or something like that. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that, I don't want to generalize, but I think people in municipal government get drawn into those areas that are outside of their responsibility for a variety of different reasons. Some of them, I think, are, they truly believe, and I can understand, that, someone has to do something about this. And, we don't think the provincial or federal government are doing their job, so we're going to step in. Now, the problem with that is when you relieve them of their responsibility, good luck ever getting them to come back and do the job that they're supposed to do. There's a number of areas in my community where the provincial and federal government are failing us. Healthcare, for instance. I mean, like every community, I got too many residents who don't have a family doctor. I've got our local hospital. The ER wait times are just so unbelievably egregious. People are are suffering. And it's heartbreaking to see. I have heard the stories. I've been with residents who have told me their horror stories. My 90-year-old grandmother is living with our family and see the touch points with the medical system, and it breaks your heart. That doesn't mean that the city can all of a sudden step in, say, hey, we're going to raise property taxes 25% and we're going to, operate a hospital. Like, we just can't. That's not what property taxation was ever intended for. And again, on any given issue, I can understand that for some people, the motivation is, hey, there's a failing here by another level of government, and so we got to fix it. I support that, but I support being a strong advocate and holding them accountable, but not letting them off the hook, because there's tons of areas where they have been let off the hook and they have downloaded costs to local government, and those costs just get passed on to taxpayers, and they are really, really feeling the pinch.
That's good, because the next question I wanted to ask you is actually leading to what you were just mentioning about values and alignment. So you remember the Douglas Todd article that came out in May 2024, a rare blue-collar politician worries about BC workers' wages. I was absolutely fascinated by this article because, I knew who you were, and I'm a political, person who really pays attention, right? But I was so interesting to read this article and hear someone who is in your position really dial into what the genuine concerns of everyday working people is. As someone who was an NDPer for more than 20 years, I left the party in 2023. that resonated with me, right? And there's a couple quotes I want to pull out. One of them that he actually uses in his byline is, "Too many on the left are now more interested in pronouns than paychecks." That was really interesting. But the one that really got me, as someone who read this just a little more than a year after leaving the NDP, a party I dedicated more than 2 decades of my life to, you said, and I quote, "At one point, those values were more identified with the NDP, but in recent years, it feels like a lot of that has been jettisoned, and they've gone down the path of identity politics. And that's not something I find very appealing. By design, it's about dividing people into groups." I felt like you were reading my mind. It's like, holy crap, here's someone who I feel kind of common cause with. Can you give us some insight into how you kind of came about that realization that a party and I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but to me, I read that as a party of the working class, grounded in the roots of social justice and the protest movement and the social gospel, all of that good stuff, started in church basements, right? Has now become pretty much, has almost walked away from that proud history.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see this across the globe, in fact, and it's a very fascinating phenomenon. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly when the shift started. The one thing I think is that it started at some point, but then it has rapidly, year over year in the last number of years, the trajectory of it has really taken off. So like when I was first involved in politics, it was with the NDP. And, again, although my family wasn't, as I said, political, they were involved in politics, but, lifelong NDP voters voted for the CCF before the NDP. It really, blue collar, working class, a lot of private sector trade union membership. And so, those are the values that I was raised with, which I still carry close to my heart. I mean, that is, those are the values I have. But to me, those values are premised on the concept of solidarity and unity. And what I believe the sort of modern left has embraced is, again, this politics of identity. And the concept of solidarity and unity, which, for instance, I think is really like the basis of the trade union movement. I put it in these terms, like, so if you're a part of a union and you're covered by a collective agreement, everyone benefits. The collective agreement does not distinguish based on your sexual orientation, your race, any of these demographic indicators. Everyone is covered by the collective agreement. And so through that process, all those workers have a collective interest to come together and to try and achieve, a better standard of living and they will all benefit. And so there's a piece there that I don't see reflected in the rhetoric or the positions or the emphasis of the left across the globe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is why, whether it be in Europe, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Canada, you see the traditional voting base of the party of the left, really abandon their historic voting tendencies. And there does feel like there's, a fairly significant political realignment that is occurring. And, I've done lots of different reading around, why that may be. The left's, I think, preoccupation with identity politics, the prioritization of cultural issues over economic bread and butter issues. Conversely, on the right, maybe they're walking away from some of their previous blind faith and basically unregulated free markets and, whatever is best for big corporations is somehow going to trickle down and help your average person. They perhaps some of them are, there's a vein over there that is perhaps rethinking their devotion to that idea. And so, everything is very, it's like it's all been shaken up and none of it's landed quite yet. So, it's all jumbled. One of the, a guy who writes a lot about this, who I really enjoy reading, is an American named Thomas Frank, and he's written a lot about this dynamic. And he has a book that I enjoy so much. I've read almost 3 times now, and it's called "The People Know," and it's about populism, essentially, in the history of populism, and the fact that. And I consider myself a populist, and that annoys some people, so it makes it even more.
So I consider myself one too. You're part of a good club.
But the kind of the history and the origin and the roots of populism, which I see as really being about ensuring that power is not concentrated in the hands of a small group of people, whether that small group of people be corporations and CEOs, government bureaucrats, academics, they kind of like can broadly you hear people toss around like the word elites. But to me, it's really about ensuring that power is not concentrated in the hands of a small number of people, that is broadly dispersed. And I believe that is also called democracy. But that was really a animating feature of the left, if over the course of our political history. And again, at some point in time, that seems to there's been a shift. And so, it's a really feels like a very unique time that we're going through, where all of the kind of preconceived notions we have about how people should vote or how they're likely to vote based on certain things all seems to be thrown out the window in many respects. It was when I was first involved in politics here in Polka. If I was door knocking and I was going up to a house and I saw a pickup truck with tools in the back, well, that's probably an NDP voter.
Yeah.
And now I bet you go knock on that door and sure shit, they're probably voting conservative. So there has been, I'm obviously not the first person to identify this as the subject of a law discussion. It's not unique to British Columbia or Canada. It's a global phenomenon. But as someone who, is, it has been very much part of that, it leaves you both not 100% sure where you fit,
Yeah.
but also a sense of empowerment. And as it relates to my responsibilities as mayor, I mean, I'm really clear on that. I have my values and what I believe in, which I think are broadly shared in my community. And my job as mayor is to do what's best for the people of Port Coquitlam. And if that offends one political party or another, or it makes one political party or another happy or angry or mad, or I could care less, because that is not my concern. So it is a very interesting time to watch all of this very kind of unsettled political realignment be taking place.
And in that vein, I wanna just close really quickly. We're in the middle of a federal election right now. Obviously, there's housing is a big deal. Cutting taxes is a big deal. I'm not going to ask you who you're voting for, who you're supporting, but I am interested, just as the mayor of POCO, what are you looking for in terms of the national leadership? Because it's a two-party race. It's going to be Poilievre, it's going to be Carney. So what are you as the mayor of POCO looking for?
Yeah, I really, I mean, there's so many things I could point to, but I really want to focus in on two things. And it's really around infrastructure, and the other piece is following through. And I say that because I am getting so tired of hearing the same things over and over and over again. One of the crosses you must carry when you become an elected official is you have to go to a lot of meetings. And, I go so many meetings with provincial and federal officials, and always say the same thing over and over again. And I'm so sick of just hearing the words. It's like, why don't you actually do something and follow through? So many grand pronouncements, but the follow through is never there. When we never seem to be able to get past some of these issues that have plagued us for decades, it's like, do what you say you're going to do, and then let's move on. And the infrastructure, I think, is a key one, because all the promises around this, and they have not materialized. The reason why I'm so concerned about it is I really think that, and we're starting to see this, we have this kind of ticking time bomb of infrastructure challenges that have been just absolutely supercharged by going through a period of what I believe was incredibly irresponsible population growth, driven by immigration numbers that were just out of this world. And I know that now, they're trying to dial it back. But there is an element of too little, too late to all of this. I mean, you go through this period of really unchecked population growth, and I don't even think they've got the numbers accurate. And the numbers as they are reported are historic. Like, in such a short period of time, such a significant population growth, driven through immigration, but also international students and temporary foreign workers. And they just, no checks and balances, just let that just fire away. And you bring in that many people, and the strain that it puts on all of our systems is incredible. And there is, because they did not do it in any sort of planned or methodical way, it was just like, okay. And I think they really did it to try and cover up the weaknesses in our economy. Because if your population is growing and people are consuming, that creates a lot of economic activity. And particularly as it relates to the housing sector, which Canada has become dangerously reliant upon, for a while, you can kind of cover up a lot of the weak spots. And so I think, partly responding to some powerful interest groups, it was just like, yeah, just throw more people at it. And what we are now experiencing is that you bring in so many people in such a short period of time. You know what? It can create a lot of challenges as well when you're not funding the infrastructure and the systems and the services that people rely upon. When you bring people in, they have needs. They have to have a place to live. They have to get around. They have to send their kids to school. They're probably going to access the healthcare system. And so, all of our systems are infrastructure that you can see and the stuff that you can't see. It's all just absolutely at a breaking point, and not just because of this, but I think that this, my opinion, again, incredibly irresponsible decisions over the last number of years as it relates to this area have exasperated these challenges significantly. And just saying, okay, well, now we're going to have fewer people come is not in of itself a solution. We are still feeling the impacts and the challenges. And so I really think that for me, that is something that is incredibly top of mind. It impacts us here in Port Coquitlam, but it impacts everyone right across the country.
Pat, before we let you go, did you have any final thoughts for my listeners before we let you go back to the rest of your Friday?
I would just encourage people to be involved. I think I certainly understand and can appreciate people's frustration with the state of things and with politics. And it can be very disheartening. There's certainly a temptation to just throw your hands up and to say, oh, the hell with it. But that's exactly what some folks want. And I think if we're going to get our country and our province and our communities going in the right direction, we need more people involved, not less. And so I just really encourage people to stay involved, to pay attention, and to keep fighting for the things that they think are important, and just really encourage people to do that. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated it and really enjoyed it.
Mayor Brad West, Mayor of the great city of Port Coquitlam, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope we can have you back again in the not too distant future.
I look forward to that.